If you want to start recording. Great. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a design subcommittee meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. Today's date is Tuesday, April 15th, and this is session B of the BCDC Design Subcommittee. The Planning Department continues hosting public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. I am Seth Reisman, Deputy Director of Design Review at the City of Boston Planning Department. Before we proceed with the agenda, the open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Commission staff are recording this meeting. Please turn off your camera and microphone if you do not wish to be recorded. For the record, commissioners present include Commissioner Gilly Smith, Commissioner Kim, Commissioner Love, Commissioner Lubenow, and Commissioner Ron, and we expect to be joined by Commissioner Manfredi at about 6 p.m. Tonight's agenda will include presentations for the proposed project at One Joslin Place in the Longwood Medical Area and 181 West First Street in South Boston. Tonight's meeting will follow the typical BCDC Design Subcommittee format, beginning with a brief presentation from the proponent, comments from BCDC commissioners, and public testimony. So starting with One Joslin Place, a proposed project at this location contemplates the development of 495,000 square feet of hospital use and 250 garage parking spaces in a single building on an approximately 1 acre site in accordance with the approved 10-year institutional master plan for BIDMC and DFCI. This will be the third presentation of the ADB application for this proposed project to the Design Subcommittee, following an introduction at the December 3rd monthly meeting and subsequent subcommittees on January 21st and March 18th. The Commission previously reviewed and approved IMPs for the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which set forth the regulatory context for this proposed project. This design subcommittee will focus on a proposed reconfiguration of Joslin Park and the surrounding right-of-way. It is expected that a future design subcommittee meeting will focus on updates to the proposed pedestrian bridges and architectural expression of the building itself. It is my understanding that Commissioner Kim has recused herself from deliberation. Are there any other commissioners present who intend to recuse? Okay. And a little more context on the review for this evening. Tonight, the Commission will be reviewing a conceptual framework approach to a potential reconfiguration of Joslin Park and its immediate environs as part of the Article 80B proposed project. As part of the IMPs, it was recommended by the Commission and encoded into these IMPs by the Planning Department that a building face to building face reconsideration of Joslin Park, the surrounding right-of-ways, and frontages of privately owned parcels be part of the improvements associated with the proposed One Joslin Place project. As a condition of the Planning Department's approval of the IMP and the One Joslin Place project, the proponent has committed funding and resources towards this effort. The Planning Department staff has convened the project proponent and representatives from the staff of the Boston Parks and Recreation Department, Boston Transportation Department, and the Public Improvement Commission to provide input on this effort. The Planning Department's priorities in the design explorations for these spaces include increasing the quality and quantity of park space, expanding programming opportunities within the open space, prioritizing pedestrian connectivity, accessibility, and safety, as well as bringing a better balance between open space and vehicular circulation needs. Because the rights-of-way are owned by the City of Boston, any changes to them will be subject to the review and approval of the City of Boston Transportation Department and the City of Boston Public Improvement Commission. Because Joslin Park itself is owned by the City of Boston Parks and Recreation Department, any changes to the park will be the result of a separate design and review process led by Parks and subject to approval by Parks as well as the Boston Parks Commission. As the review and recommendation of BCDC is advisory to the Planning Department staff will advance the feedback and recommendations provided by BCDC in our ongoing coordination efforts with the proponent and other city departments. Work thus far has focused on the feasibility of the changes to circulation and fundamental design constraints such as grading, emergency vehicle access, and the city's requirements for rights-of-way. The final programming and design of the park will be the result of a separate public process run by Boston Parks. As such, the goal of the design exercise is to create a flexible framework for the future design of the park. Any specific designs generated by the proponent and reviewed by BCDC are illustrative in nature and suggestive of potential design strategies for the site. As such, the planning department is seeking your feedback on the relative merits of the overall approach put forth by the proponent and other considerations for the future design of the space. While feedback on specific design elements is welcome, please note that the actual design will be generated by the separate Parks Department process to engage the community, which is anticipated to begin sometime after the Article 80B approval for the proposed project. Also note that the strategy presented tonight involves a reconfiguration of the boundaries of both public rights-of-ways and park space, and thus subject to Article 97 authority, which means that any changes will need to be to the boundaries of the park will need to be approved by the state legislature. Consistent with the recommendation of the BCDC to consider a building face to building face improvement to the space, the planning departments believe there is merit in exploring solutions that adjust park and right-of-way boundaries. However, the decision on whether or not to pursue adjusting those boundaries will be decided by other City of Boston departments and commissions, and ultimately the state legislature. Before the proponent begins the presentation, I would like to see if there are any questions from commissioners. And any questions from the public will be addressed during the public testimony portion of the evening. Okay, seeing no questions from the commissioners, and after the longest preamble I think I've given to a project so far, I would like to turn it over to the proponents to get to the good stuff. A reminder that you will have presentations are limited to 15 minutes, and we will give you a halftime and 1 minute warning. And with that, I invite the proponent to share their screen and begin presenting whenever ready.
Thank you very much, Seth. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Michael Hinchcliffe, principal at Payette here in Boston. I'm joined by my fellow principal, Kevin Sullivan, as well as Chris Donahue from Michael Van Valkenburg, landscape architects, who will be sharing the majority of the information tonight. So thank you, Seth, for that incredibly detailed introduction. As you said, we will be focusing tonight on Joslin Park. For immediate context, our presentation will focus, as Seth said, on the park itself and that building face to building face approach. We will return again, hopefully very soon, to give you an update on the hospital connectors and the overall building design. As Seth said, we talked a lot about Joslin Park through the IMP process and the many times that we met with you in full committee and subcommittee for the IMP, and then again the summary of when we've met for the specific context of the park. What we wanted to do is say that through all of those meetings with you, we heard quite a number of times that we needed to think comprehensively about the urban realm, from building face to building face, and the true pedestrian experience and vehicular experience in the whole district as it impacts the future cancer hospital, the Rosenberg building, which is the home of the emergency department for Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, as well as this very valuable public asset of Joslin Park at its heart. We've taken those into consideration, and as Seth said, the opportunity to reevaluate circulation and the park boundaries was one that we welcomed with open arms. And Chris has some very interesting things to share with you in terms of the development of Joslin Park. As a reminder of the scope, here we are in Longwood Medical and Academic area. To refresh your memory, the Future Cancer Hospital is located between Brookline Avenue, Pilgrim Road, just to the south of Longwood Avenue. Today we'll be talking about Joslin Park, which is currently 2 one-way couplets of Joslin Place, which heads west, and Deaconess Road, which heads east. At the institutional master plan, we really talked about the need to evaluate, as I said earlier, building face to building face. So when we look at the front facade of the cancer hospital on the right, all the way to the existing front facade of an entry to the emergency room in Rosenberg, how much leeway do we have there to think more comprehensively about the parklands? With this overhead view, and Chris, let me know when you'd like to take over. We see that the existing park today is similar to parks that you find in the South End or other older areas of the cities. That is really a very linear park with static boundaries and edges that has many opportunities when viewed from its approaches for a more dynamic environment. So Chris, let me hand it over to you to talk about some of the design principles that underlie the studies that we're presenting today.
Sure. Thanks, Michael, and thank you all for being here tonight. As you all know, you've encouraged us to look at the park more comprehensively and especially how it engages with the larger public realm. It is, as Michael said, a very linear, narrow site, and the way that it's framed by four streets makes it a bit disconnected from the larger, urban fabric. And so the opportunity to color outside the lines a little bit has been quite liberating, and a lot of fun for our team to think about how this park really could engage the neighborhood at a much larger scale, have a larger impact. So we've gone through this study with some principles in mind, principles that have formed out of conversations with you all, with the planning department, PIC, parks, etc. These are sort of high level, but have been the underpinnings of all of our studies to date. At the core, this exercise should improve accessibility to, from, and through the park. It should eliminate unsafe crossings, pedestrian crossings, by redirecting existing desire lines that are often in conflict with vehicular traffic. It should increase capacity for programming at the park. And in doing so, it should elevate the park as a destination landscape within the city. Whatever we do from a landscape perspective should support Boston's urban forest plan and initiative to provide more urban canopy. And then at the end of the day, whatever comes out of this exercise should be at the very least a net neutral, but hopefully an increase to the square footage of Joslin Park, so that it can be not just experientially greater, but physically greater in size. I'll go through this part quickly because I think we've looked at this with you all, but we went through the exercise of a very rigorous study of the existing conditions, including the existing canopy, the existing understory, hardscape and materiality, the existing site furnishings and the role that they play in how people occupy the space, and then the role of shadow, both existing shadow and proposed or net new shadow from the proposed building project adjacent. Um, we also looked sort of qualitatively at what makes this park a good place to be, a good urban park. The role that planting plays in creating a sort of garden frame in an otherwise very urban and institutional scale environment. The role that an urban canopy plays in providing comfort and carbon sequestration in the city, and the role that ample seating plays in providing a welcoming and accessible environment for people. But then we also looked at the existing opportunities for improvement, that linearity of the park only sort of exacerbating the scalar issues, right? It's incredibly narrow, and by having just a single path with open lawn adjacent to it and a single frame on either side, it's quite limiting in terms of how the park might be used and the experiential range that you can get from it. That lawn that frames it, because it's just a single narrow path, is often quite beaten by people walking off the side of the path to go around one another. And that, as I said, the role that the four streets on every side of the park play in really disconnecting it from its context and making it somewhat difficult to access and use comfortably. As I said, we looked at the occupancy, we looked at how people travel through the site, took a quite detailed mapping of, who's moving through the site, when, at different times of day, in different conditions, weather conditions, etc. We took stock in terms of what people were doing there. Programming was, really limited to people coming to eat lunch, smoke a cigarette, or, make a quick phone call, hoping that whatever we do at this park can help to amplify and increase the programmatic range. We distilled that diagram of pedestrian circulation down to a sort of what does this all mean? And notice that, as I said, quite a lot of people are crossing at places that are not intended for pedestrian crossing. They're crossing, stepping out between parked cars, illegally parked cars, and into traffic on very busy roads. So thinking about how we can improve that condition as well with this study. Um, there's, as we all know from working in Boston, just like any other urban street, there are lots and lots of utilities that run through the park, through the right of way. Some of them are quite shallow, including the tunnel that runs underneath, right down the center of the park. There's also existing chilled water lines, an electrical duct bank that runs along the sort of north end of the park, and then steam and water lines that run through the street, as well as sanitary sewer. And that there is that existing tunnel ventilation tower that also doubles as signage for the ER just across the street. Um, and so we went through, this exercise of, as I said, something that's been quite a lot of fun. This idea of a strategic redistribution of the park space, something that um, simplifies vehicular um, simplifies vehicular circulation, makes pedestrian crossings safer, hopefully, and also at the end of the day increases the size of the park. This diagram suggesting approximately a 13% increase in the square footage of the park through this proposed realignment. You can see the yellow line, the faint yellow line on the diagram on the right, suggesting the existing property line relative to the new proposed park area. Um, I saw when I was preparing just a minute ago that these diagrams are mislabeled. That's my fault. But noting that there's lots of ways to look at this, and so we've looked at how to manage pedestrian crossings and vehicular circulation dozens of ways. I've sort of distilled this down to 4 high-level exercises for clarity. But looking at the first one, a series of perpendicular crossings across both Joslin Place and Deaconess. Those one crossings marked in orange would be new.
And Chris, you're at about halftime.
Okay, great. Additional mid-block crossings on top right, bottom corner, suggesting that crossings happen at the corner in this new reconfiguration of Joslin Place, and the last one being a single mid-block crossing that sort of focuses pedestrian circulation between the two park networks. I'll focus on that last plan and how it's developed just to talk about the park broadly. The idea was to create something that had quite a lot of connectivity through it, connectivity to the adjacent public realm and to the adjacent buildings, connecting to Brookline Avenue and from Pilgrim Road. But really, most importantly, that in the, what initially felt like bifurcation of an already relatively small park, that we're actually making it even more well connected to the urban realm, and that these two park networks become really well integrated and quite diverse in how they offer a range of experience for people in the city. The result is a sort of series of terraces that gradually step up from Brookline Ave to Pilgrim Road, so sort of east to west in this drawing orientation, stepping up off of Brookline for a sort of elevated terrace, and then a network of pathways, if you go to the next slide, please, that weave these spaces together. We've turned that gradually sloping lawn with a single path into a network of accessible garden rooms or event spaces that are connected by a really robust and diverse set of meandering paths through the park. Looking at it in plan, but also in cross section, how this park then connects to the future cancer hospital on the right, that lobby garden that we've talked a bit about in past meetings with you all, and we'll continue to talk about how that plays a role in connecting to the exterior landscape. Looking at how this elevated garden room, this is the east section adjacent to Brookline, creates a sort of terrace above the street level, sort of just above your eye level, above the cars, and framed by planting rather than vehicular traffic, accessible pathways that meander up and through, and then how other smaller scale garden rooms also occupy the park as you move further west, again registering that existing tunnel that in this section is down a bit far, but in other places can be quite shallow in its depth. And looking at how the park sits relative to the existing property lines, expanding upon that a bit. early in the process, so using landscape precedents to talk about the qualitative aspects. This is Teardrop Park, one of MVDA's relatively well-known landscape, a landscape that is small but also sort of separate into garden rooms, and in a way makes itself feel much larger than it is because of that distinct separation of rooms that are quite immersive and natural. It negotiates quite a lot of grade change as well, and does so intentionally to break up the scale, and uses that grade change to create places to occupy, amphitheaters, natural stone outcroppings, and that they becomes a really active landscape as well. Um, Looking at the quality of these landscape rooms that I've been describing, we're thinking about a planting strategy that has continuity all the way from Pilgrim Road, the sort of narrow circles, a layering of fastigiate trees that runs through the entire park and registers up against the Pilgrim Road connector. But then that these rooms each have their own sort of identity of, a particular flowering tree that registers throughout the season as spring emerges. Just as we're all seeing is pretty fantastic time to be in the city right now, with the magnolias and red buds and things that are coming on right now, and cherries. Thinking about how those landscape rooms or those garden rooms can also be programmed and activated. They're not very large, but they're large enough to be pretty impactful in terms of gathering people. This showing a series, just a for instance, of 10 by 10 and 10 by 20 tents that could be used for farmers markets, or a sort of networking event for the LMA. Lots of ways to think about how we could use this space, and it becomes more of a destination within the city. Those rooms framed by, as I said, a series of garden meanders that are framed by planting, allow for a more robust urban canopy, and lots of ways to move through this in a very accessible way. And that some of that negotiation of grade, they become opportunities to create gathering places, amphitheaters, stone outcroppings, places for people to sit and eat lunch and gather together. Those rooms framed by layered planting, understory, mid-story, canopy trees. Those of you who know our work know we're really into planting and creating really robust urban environments. And then looking just again at this plan, if you go to the next one, and how it all comes together into
Chris, about a minute left.
Yep, great, thanks. This showing the existing park area, about 13,307 square feet. The proposed park area shown in orange, just over 15,000 square feet. So a new net park area of about 1,734 square feet, roughly 13% increase in size. And showing how that still negotiates and helps to simplify some of that really important, traffic that comes with the medical facilities in this area as well. Creating a new visitor patient drop-off area for the cancer hospital, and a valet or patient drop-off for the emergency room at Rosenberg. And we can leave it here just for conversation, I think. But the idea here, or the opportunity, is a park network that's really well connected, brings people into this park, not just for, a quick phone call, but places to gather, places to spend time, ways for the LMA to gather as a community in outdoor public space, and to significantly increase the park's capacity for programming and for accessibility.
Thanks, Chris. That concludes our presentation, Seth.
All
Great,
right,
commissioners.
commissioners. Anne Marie, I think you're muted.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you for the presentation. I just have a question. Could you talk a little bit about circulation through the site, in terms of how patients or people who are there with family members would move through the site? Because I think as we've reviewed this project, I know a consideration has been the movement between buildings. There is pressure on internal circulation to be able to move between the buildings. And I'm just wondering, when I look at this plan, the circulation, as you've outlined, looks a little bit circuitous. I'm just curious, what if I'm in one building, is it likely that I will be moving from Rosenberg to the future cancer hospital? Just help me understand a little bit the typical movement between buildings on the site.
Sure. So maybe I'll start and then Michael, you can jump in. But right now there is a little bit of an existing desire line between Joslin Diabetes Center and Rosenberg because there's some staff that move back and forth between the two occasionally. We see a lot less of that probably with the future cancer hospital and the emergency room, being that they will be largely two different institutions. I think I said jokingly with the planning department the other day, if you're going between those two buildings in one day, you're probably having a pretty bad day, right? And I just don't think it'll be a desire line that happens all that much. And to the point, to the or to the event that it does, a little bit of a meander through the park might be a nice reprieve actually in the middle of your day. We've wrestled with, as I showed in that initial diagram, lots of ways to look at this and whether a connection directly across the street from the cancer hospital or Rosenberg was appropriate or safe from a vehicular and or pedestrian standpoint. In both cases, worried about the conflict that's created between people arriving in cars, either at an emergency room where your focus is elsewhere, or similarly where you're arriving at a car for an appointment at a cancer hospital. Encouraging people to cross exactly at that location in our conversations with VHB and with BI and Dana-Farber felt like a conflict that could potentially create an unsafe condition. So pulling those two layers of circulation apart through a single crossing that provides greater connectivity between the two parks felt like the safer option. Still something we're developing though.
Chris, I can think of a few things to clarify there in your description. So yes, Anne-Marie, it is the patterns that we see today will change, and as Chris said, there will be very little cross connection between the two, and this idea that when the drop-offs also function in their totality. So as Chris said, for pedestrian safety, they really are units that are accessed from either side, and this idea of moving to the edges into the park from an occupancy standpoint makes a lot of sense from the healthcare perspective.
And I guess I'm curious, I want to turn over to my colleagues, but I'm just curious about the sight lines, because it seemed, to be frank, it just seems a little counterintuitive to me, because I'm just sort of imagining being on the site and looking for building entrances, and my instinct is, how do I get from one place to another as quickly as possible, with the understanding about the goal of creating a place for respite. I know that's very much been a part of this conversation. So those are just some of the questions and concerns that come to my mind. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Shauna?
Thanks very much for the presentation, Chris and Michael. There's a lot I really love about this. I think the grading strategy of the terraces is actually really nice in that, particularly when you were showing the section where the lobby was at the same height as the terrace. I think the abundance of green space is really nice too. And the overall character, I also really appreciate. I do have a question. Maybe at the end you can explain the traffic circulation. And I know that this is a pretty early version. I think it's a strong, very early version. There's a couple things, and I know you may not, given Seth's introduction, that this may not be something that how this is taken much further at this point. But there is a level of sameness to each of the different spaces at this point in the project. As lovely as they are, they're sort of very planted spaces, terraces with rock outcroppings. And I think the circulation is a little bit, as Anne-Marie suggested, a little bit potentially confusing, particularly for the mobility impaired. I think they could get to a dead end and have to back up again. Again, this is something going forward. It doesn't, as a foundation, I still think this is very strong. And then the one other thing that I wanted to mention is that Teardrop Park is a lovely, lovely park. But I feel that it is very much about being separate from the buildings. And I think in this particular case, with the amount of effort that's being put into the lobby and to kind of the big sculpted eyebrow of the lobby, that the planting strategy feels like it's isolating, and the outcrop strategy feels like it's isolating the park away from the building. And I think that particularly the particular planting strategy, the heights of the trees and the amount of opening between visual opening as well as physical opening between where we're seeing the big 43.5 and the lobby space, I think is something that that I would look at going forward with whomever is going forward with this, to understand how that could be embracing the whole verticality of the lobby, the eyebrow, the indoor and outdoor space. It is still providing a respite in these little terraced rooms, but not, I feel that if you're in the garden room right now, it may be too separate from the experience of the architecture and the lobby. Again, though, I think it's a really exciting, from my perspective, a very exciting and dramatically different approach, and it doesn't feel like a singular strip of green in the middle of the traffic. So I'm very impressed and excited by the developments so far.
Maybe I'll chime in because I'm going to echo what Shauna said. I think this is very exciting. I don't think we imagined that it would be so transformed. But what's really strong is that connection between the winter garden lobby to, now the landscape. And this entry point, in my mind, really rationalizes where your entrance is to the building. Remember, I was always a little bit, challenged by where that entrance is. And now I think it actually almost post-rationalized. Maybe you knew it was going to happen the whole time, but I had didn't have that insight. So I think it's really strong. I do have two questions. There is that one sidewalk that's labeled, well, between the winter garden terrace and the, terrace that's labeled 43.5. There's that sidewalk at 5%. It kind of feels like it's taking you to nowhere. There's not really a crosswalk. And so I'm just curious about what happens up and down that street if that, I'm not suggesting that it goes away, but it just feels like there's no destination for it. So something might be considered there. And then the other question I have is, because emergency vehicles are getting to the Rosenberg building, I trust that you worked this all out, but it feels like there's almost a pinch point, and I just, want to make sure that all of that discussions have happened with BTD to make sure that that's not going to slow ambulances from getting to the Rosenberg building. But overall, I think this, I echo what Shauna says, very exciting.
Thank you, Mimi.
And Michael, you should, and Chris, feel free to respond to Mimi's questions.
Sure, Chris. I'll leave it to you to start, Chris.
Sure. So the first question about that sidewalk, it's something we've been struggling with, actually, is how to make that feel as if it's part of both the sort of part of both the park and just the broader context in the public realm. People coming from, we see that as sort of a sidewalk that hospital staff will likely use to go out into the neighborhood, get something for lunch or dinner or whatever, and walk back. It's a shortcut into like the broader, urban realm and into the, where that retail area is, just north of where this drawing is cut off. So I think to that end, it's a little bit of a shortcut along the side of the park that gets you out into the city a little bit quicker. It's also just part of that public way. We did look at ways to bend it into the park so it becomes a little bit more part of the park. But the the comment just a minute ago about maybe connecting the interior lobby garden to the public realm a little bit better does make me think about that sidewalk and how the sidewalk and terrace and all those two might work together to be a little bit more porous. So I think how we look at that sidewalk is definitely something that maybe should be more than just that shortcut that I've described it as just now.
And I think if I can add, Mimi, one of the challenges that the city was having that we were looking at was how to create synergy with that portion of the park and the lobby, right? Because I know that was such a huge point of conversation during the IMP, right? That corner and what that was going to be and how is that going to feel public? And so in some ways this really does do that by creating, public park right there. But our concern was also how do we make sure that that park feels truly public and truly distinct and yet has synergy at the same time. And so I think that's the needle we've been trying to figure out how to thread.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
I'm going to pull up this comparison, Mimi, of the current situation to the proposed to respond to some of your comments about circulation. We think that this change does eliminate a very confusing situation in the city where the residue of a residential neighborhood is a relic in a very busy urban situation. That the couplet of one-way circulation around Joslin Park with the two closely spaced intersections was one that we struggled with our traffic engineers to resolve and make safe for building entry, for wayfinding, and for overall circulation. So the new configuration on the right, we're working very closely to see how now from this initial concept, how can we better design that intersection? It does join Joslin Place and Deaconess into a single intersection, which shortens the pedestrian crossings, allows better turnings into the arrival sequence, and creates a more intuitive rotary circulation around the park for people that are coming off of Brookline to the Rosenberg drop-off, but also, again, that intuitive alignment of Joslin Place with the entry to the cancer hospital as well. Emergency vehicle traffic will likely be focused on Pilgrim Road. So ambulance traffic will be moving from Longwood to Pilgrim and really won't make this circulation much very frequently. But we are looking at ways for emergency vehicles like fire trucks or other things, the turning radiuses from Brookline onto Joslin, to see if we can make that the throat between those two combined streets a little narrower, so that the north-south crossing feels a little bit more natural and kinder in scale. But in general, there are some significant improvements to the overall circulation. But we did want to be very cautious as well. There's the current situation of double parking that's illegal on both streets, so that the drop-offs are intuitive, they're well defined, they encourage a good flow of traffic around them, but that they're also well placed and safe and make sense with where we're sending the visual cues of the building entries to those drop-offs.
Oh, could I just ask a couple questions on that? First
Sure,
of all,
Sean.
I hadn't recognized the expanded pedestrian crossing area, which I think is pretty nice the way it collects it. Could you explain the sort of one-way drop-off as well as the drop-off on the park side, just for our full understanding? Is it one lane with,
Sure.
just being really specific about everything?
Yes, very specifically, the width of the redirected Joslin Place is one 20-foot way, one single lane of travel with no parking on either side. 20 feet is the minimum for emergency vehicle access. So the single lane continues as a single lane of travel throughout Joslin Place. That defines a distinct drop-off that is organized into accessible drop-off and regular drop-off underneath the canopy of the hospital entry. So Joslin Place really is intended to be one single lane of one-way travel from Brookline to Pilgrim Road with a distinct defined drop-off with no parking intended on either side for its length. Deaconess is similar. It is also sized as one 20-foot travel lane with one singular drop-off that is organized for both valet and emergency drop-off. At the future cancer hospital, we'll have valet parking and service inside the garage. At Rosenberg here, it's still a very, very busy mixed entry, but the proposal is for one lane of eastbound traffic. We are holding, for discussion purposes, a separate lay-by here that could be used for shuttle bus staging. It could be used for overheight transport vehicle parking. Sometimes chair cars and other patient transport vehicles aren't large enough to enter parking garages. So this serves as a kind of lay-by staging area for those cars that may be bringing people to the emergency department at Deaconess. Now, after the crosswalk located here, Deaconess does split into two turning lanes. So a right and left turning lane onto Brookline Avenue, or straight through travel to Jimmy Fund, which is a two-way street. The overall circulation does improve as well with the opening of Pilgrim Road to two-way circulation. So in a larger district scale, people are still now able to enter from the Riverway in a two-way fashion onto Deaconess, but they're also able to make a U-turn from Deaconess onto Joslin Place for secondary entry to the loop at the cancer hospital. So there's we tried to simplify it, but the intentionality really is one way, one lane travel on both roads.
Thank you. That's
welcome.
very helpful.
This is Bill. Michael, or anyone can answer my question. This kind of follows from a couple other questions that have been raised. I'm looking at the buildings on the east side of Brookline Avenue and imagining people from those buildings wanting to use this park space. And I realize there's real advantage to having consolidated traffic coming onto Brookline Avenue from either side. That's a positive. That's a very positive thing. But I am struck by the fact that there's not kind of through passageway from those crosswalks from the east side of Brookline Avenue, from those crosswalks into the park. And I'm curious why that is.
Chris, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah,
let me know if let me know if there's a different slide you'd like me to bring up, Chris, to
Sure.
talk through this.
No, this is a good one. It's definitely something we're still wrestling with. I will say that the negotiating the 10-foot grade change from east to west plays an enormous role, while also trying to stay above that existing utility tunnel. Plays a very challenging but enormous role in trying to weave these navigable pathways and accessible pathways through. So I think we're still trying to get the desire lines exactly right, and you've identified a good one for us to focus on as part of a next study. But I think the idea is that coming from that intersection that you've highlighted, people would either walk along the sidewalk that runs along the sort of that new slanted portion of Joslin Place, or realigned portion of Joslin Place, or just go a very short few steps to the north and up into that terrace, or through that meandering pathway. At times, this diagram, I think, is almost deceiving in scale. If you consider how large this plot is, that's something that feels circuitous based on these blue arrows that meander through the space. If you put yourself back into how large the space actually is, you're reminded that that is truly a few steps to the right, rather than a quarter-mile loop through the park to find a different space. Yeah, that 46-foot dimension is an important one. So while maybe there isn't a direct shot just yet in this diagram, I don't think that it's a terribly far journey to get into the park from that intersection, and we can continue to massage those desire lines.
Well, Chris, in many ways, the park right now does a very nice job of connecting the future cancer hospital to the Rosenberg building. I mean, it's I agree it's not a direct path, but it feels like it can encourage active meandering on that path. But it's from the east and west sides where the new park layout doesn't feel like it does the same form of connecting. I mean, this park is all about connecting four sides to an open space, and two of the sides on the north and the south are quite clear, but it's the lack of connection in the east-west direction across Brookline or even Pilgrim that I would encourage you to play with, because you've obviously thought about it, and it may be tricky. I'm still learning the elevations of this, but so I encourage you to continue to look at that.
Certainly, thank you.
Go ahead, Anne Marie.
If I could just add to that, I want to continue to push a little bit on the role of connections that, Bill was describing, I mentioned earlier. I think as I reflect back on the evolution of this project, I think a big piece of at least what I felt we've been grappling with is how do we how do we unify this collection of how do we take this opportunity with a major investment by the hospital on one of the sites to unify a collection of buildings that have a shared purpose. And I think the park, in my mind, has always played a pivotal role in that. So this is not a critique of the quality of the landscape you've created, but rather thinking about the relationship of the landscape vis-a-vis the campus of buildings. And I just can't help but look for something that is a space that helps to center an individual, so much the way Central Park, albeit totally different scale, is sort of a center or an anchor for New York, for the neighborhoods surrounding it. But then within it, there are still a collection of different experiences. So I really appreciate the degree to which you're thinking about this as, offering places for respite for whether you're working in the building, you're visiting the building, you're a family member, or you're somebody in the surrounding community. But I still imagine myself as somebody who spends a lot of time walking to different places. I always think about, from an urban design standpoint, the role of visual orientation, the role of providing cues, of help me get to one place or another, and at least looking at this in plan. And I too am trying to catch up and understand the role of grading and elevation. When I look at the plan, it frankly creates more confusion for me than assistance and kind of a sense of centering. So that's just one thing I'd encourage you to think about as you look at this. And frankly, even driving, making that turn from Brookline into the campus, I worry a little bit about, turning in there in a car and thinking, oh, is that, is the one street two-way or not? Just sort of thinking, what is it going to feel like to turn into that space? So I know the team has a lot of experience. I have confidence you will figure this out, but these are the questions that come to my mind when I look at the proposal. Thanks.
Can I just pick up on that? And I'm not agreeing or disagreeing completely with Anne Marie's statement, but I think at this point there's a real consistency in the green kind of closing off the outside. I think it's and so I think in developing the project, a lot of it, I think it will be about the scale of the planting and where the trees are thicker and thinner to be able to help with that visual connection from one side to another. And I think that's really sort of a subtle development of the plan from my perspective, rather than a dramatic change.
Thank you. I agreed that porosity will be huge in terms of orienting through the space and opening it up while also making places that are comfortable and provide respite. Thank you.
Seth, it could be that we're ready to go to public comment unless there are any commissioners with any last comments. Looks like we're ready.
Okay, so at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and I will call on you. If you are calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep comments to 2 minutes. I do see a hand raised. Tom Yardley, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, thanks, Seth. 2 minutes is going to be a little tough here. So I'm Tom Yardley. I'm VP for Area Planning and Development for the Longwood Collective. We represent 22 members in the Longwood medical and academic area, including the proponents. For 50 years, we've served as stewards for Longwood. I run a department of planners and designers, run the local TMA, and we also operate a fleet of shuttles, 2,000 parking spaces, run a daycare facility, amongst other things. Thanks for the opportunity. I want to quickly get to the substance and not speak too much around those things. But one of the things we do is a placemaking program, and so it's on spaces throughout the district. So we're extremely familiar with Joslin Park as it is today, and I'm really excited to hear BCDC's sort of reaction to MBVA's excellent concept plan. And actually, we came up with a very similar plan independently when we were sketching ideas out. So I'm extremely excited to see this concept. Sort of one thing to think about, we don't have many easily accessible public parks. Yes, we have the Emerald Necklace around us, but we have busy arterials separating our 73,000 employees from easily getting into those parks, and they're not all the ADA accessible paths. So I cannot overstate how important even a relatively small pocket park like this is to the district. We have 130,000 people visiting daily. The concept addresses 2 big issues from our perspective. It improves the public realm and it rationalizes the street network. And I think that opportunity along a very congested frontage of Brookline Avenue is both the great opportunity and the challenge, as some of the comments have sort of identified tonight. How can we make that inviting? And I think that corner with one of the parks sort of announcing the entry to the rest of the park across the street, I'm not articulating that super clearly, it's going to be really important. So I think these comments are really good. You know, I think I'll save these comments, if I may, quickly for later, but we have some technical comments about road widths. They should be minimized as much as possible. And I would strongly urge getting rid of the sidewalk around the perimeter of the park, unless by the taxi stand or maybe some other areas where it's necessary, or just at least something to be looked at. Anyway, those are the extent of our comments, and we're very supportive of this concept. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Allison Pultinas, I see your hand raised. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, hi, thank you. I too think this is very exciting and look forward to an increase in green space along Brookline Avenue. I think that's really important. My number one concern is aligning the crosswalks and the pathways in the park with building entrances, because again, being rational about who will use this park and how it's used now and will be used in the future. It will be used by people who typically are short of time, are going for lunch, are hurrying to a bus stop, whatever, or have mobility challenges. So thinking about what is the shortest route from the building entrances, to me, makes the most sense. And thinking about the connection from Pilgrim Road all the way to Brookline and where people are walking to go buy lunch, I think is important. But I do look forward to an increase in green space. I think that's a wonderful idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Is there any other person present who would like to provide public testimony? Okay, seeing none, maybe Lizzie, you can stop sharing and proponent can reshare back to a site plan. And certainly feel free to address the, any of the questions or comments from the public that came up.
This is taking a picture.
So I guess at this point, we thank you to the commissioners for your comments and to the public as well. I don't know, Tom Yardley, if you had additional comments or feedback. I know you are in close contact with the proponents through your activities through the Longwood Collective, but all points very well taken. To address your comments first, Tom.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just chime in with a little bit of what I'm hearing from the commissioners, and if anyone, any fellow commissioners, I don't have it. So I think the big takeaway that I'm getting is that, this park has a potential to anchor several buildings around the campus. So it's not only the north-south connections that you should be thinking about, but really thinking about east and west. Like, how can you further expand the legibility of this park and access to this park? The planting should be a bit more porous. While the rooms are kind of exciting, they might be limiting that connection between inside-outside connection to One Joslin Park. And then there's, subtle comments about pathways. Are the pathways secondary, in particular, and main ones in the right location? I think those are the big takeaways, a lot of positive comments, and exciting to see how this all goes. And the biggest question in my mind is, how do these solid ideas go now to the city? So I would encourage like a series of guidelines, that are very prescriptive in the event that, the design has to be picked up in a different, time frame, et cetera.
Thank you. Maybe to address Allison, so one of your comments, and Tom as well. I think we are looking forward to working closely with the various city agencies, including the Public Improvements Commission, the Streets Department, Traffic and Transportation. So some of the issues around sidewalk widths or the safety of mid-block crossings or pedestrian safety will certainly come up in additional meetings, and how the rights of way develop based on city standards versus the unique character of this park, and the abutting uses are certainly very important, as are, I think, to put the goals and values of both Dana-Farber and Beth Israel out, patient safety and clarity of arrival to both the cancer hospital, but moreover, the incredibly busy and very active drop-off for Rosenberg, serving as one of the busiest emergency routes in the city. That pedestrian safety and circulation there are of utmost importance.
If I could also add, because I think these two images highlight for me thinking about the visual connection and design from above. I think particularly for people who are patients, and have, limited ability to get outside, thinking about just that aerial view as well, I think is something to consider in the design process.
Well, great, commissioners. Since there's no vote occurring, there are no formal provisos, but I think there were some excellent comments. And Mimi, thank you for summarizing them for the proponent as they continue to refine this. And I believe that the proposed project is recommended for additional review at a forthcoming subcommittee, as we have other elements of the project to get into. And they'll also be back to share with you updates as they continue to advance the open space concept. So team, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much,
Thank
staff,
you.
and thank you to the commissioners.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Okay, Bill, I understand we may be losing you, and if McYoung is online.
And myself as well, Seth. I have to leave at now
Okay,
at 6 o'clock.
thank you,
Good night,
Shauna.
everyone.
Thanks, Shauna.
Okay, so we are still joined by Commissioner Love, Commissioner Lubenow, and Commissioner Kim. And so
And-
let's turn, did I miss somebody?
No, I said, and we're hoping that Commissioner Manfredi joins us.
Yes. And let's turn to our second agenda item for the evening, which is 181 West First Street in South Boston. And this is actually a notice of project change. A proposed project at 181 West First Street, seeking a notice of project change entitlement, contemplates increasing the proposed height and density of an approved project previously reviewed by the BCDC and approved by the BPDA board back in 2014. This will be the first presentation of the proposed project to the design subcommittee following an introduction back in January of 2025. It is my understanding that there are no commissioners present who intend to recuse themselves. A reminder to proponent teams that presentation will be limited to 15 minutes. I will give you a halftime warning and a 1-minute warning. And with that, I invite the proponent team to begin sharing their screen and presenting whenever ready.
Seth, we're being asked by
Oh, they did.
Peter's. Oh, okay.
They
We
let me in.
elevated. Oh, okay. All right.
Let me in. I'd like to introduce Ron, our team. So I've got our landscape architect, Antoine Almeida here. I've got Ron Bennett from the project architect, and myself as the presenters. Ron, I'm going to let you take it and start with the presentation.
Thank you all. Thank you for your time this evening. We're proposing a 144 unit apartment building between 1st and 2nd Streets in Southie along C Street. We've gone back and forth quite a bit with the in our workshop meetings with BCDC, and this is the result of that feedback that we received. What we heard was we'd like to simplify the massing, pull back a portion of the building to reduce the impact on the adjacent Mahoney Park and our abutter at 186 West First. Develop the open space that is created from pulling the building back on the west side, and fine-tuning the facade of the building on, it's almost a two-sided building where we're facing a future commercial zone on First Street and our residential neighbors across 2nd Street and on C Street. This model represents what we presented in January with the changes that we've made since then. So the blue shaded areas are areas that we reduced and scaled back the building, the massing. And then we did extend the penthouse on the 5th floor slightly to try to recover some of the space that we lost to this major change here on the left. This is the western side of the building facing toward Mahoney Park. This is what we're proposing today. We've stepped back both the 4th and the 5th floors to reduce shadows on the gardens next door in Mahoney Park, and pulled back the entire 5th floor on this wing to reduce its impact on the park and our neighbor here at 186 West 2nd Street, which is an existing building that we're essentially building around. On the west facade, I just want to compare where we were in January to where we are now. You can see the penthouse at the top on the 5th floor that's been eliminated, and the entire building pulled back from less than 60 feet from the property line on 2nd Street to almost 90 feet now. and a resulting pocket park that we're creating in front of our building, adjacent to Mahoney Park. Here's a 3D view of that modified, the original presented here in January, and then the current design with the pocket park developed, and also showing our neighbor's building at 186 West 2nd in more detail. Another view of that same space. We have a landscape design by MDLA. If you have any questions, Anton's here to answer them. We're surrounding the building with sidewalk level planting, anywhere from 5 to 9 feet around the building with, I'll zoom in a little bit. Also adding a number of street trees. And of course, the feature open space is our pocket park adjacent to Mahoney Park. The grade is essentially even across the property line, although there are established plantings now in Mahoney Park that we'd prefer not to disturb. So there's a visual connection, and the spaces should read as all as one, our pocket park with Mahoney Park, but there's no physical connection to walk between them, but they are easily accessed from the sidewalk on West 2nd Street. We have our electric service in this space for lack of another place to locate it on the site, and we will screen it with vegetation to do our best to conceal it. The Mahoney Park actually has something very similar in this area, number 6, where they have their switch and transformer close to the street, and also behind a vegetative screen. We've got some renderings. This is the corner of West 2nd Street and C Street, our building entrance on West 2nd Street here. We included the original design from January for reference. We refined this corner with the setbacks up on the 4th floor to create a better transition from brick to metal. The 5th floor is still set back enough so when you're on the street, across the street on the sidewalk on 2nd Street, and you look up, the building should look like a 4-story building, which aligns with the signal building down the street and a 4th floor datum on the building across from us, across C Street. In the process of developing the design, we eliminated any raised planters along the sidewalk and instead substituted or replaced that with a 6-inch high granite curb between our sidewalk and planting area, with a variety of plants along the foundation. Brick all the way down to the ground, no exposed concrete.
And team, about halftime.
Okay, thank you. We did slightly shift the entrance to optimize our garage layout, because in shrinking the west wing of the building, we did lose 3 parking spaces, and we knew our neighbors wouldn't like that. So we did manage to tweak the entrance location to optimize the parking, and we recovered those 3 parking spaces in the garage. So although we reduced the footprint of the building, we still have the same number of parking spaces. This is C Street and First Street. C Street, we've simplified the massing and materials. On First Street, we eliminated the false frames and metal panels between the windows and instead have a simple reveal in the brick masonry that relates to the balconies on both corners of the First Street facade. The scale of this facade is different from the rest of the building, given that it faces First Street, which we anticipate is a a future, commercial thoroughfare. We increased the amount of and height of the glass along the retail spaces on First Street. So this reads more like retail or public space, and we developed the First Street entrance somewhat with a larger overhang and again more glass to make the First Street entrance more prominent. And again, you can see the planters are at sidewalk level here as opposed to raised planters. And we added some windows to the garage where we're showing a lot of foundation just to break up that large area of brick on the sidewalk. We have elevations here, which I think are really better represented in the 3D renderings, but we've got them here for reference. Our 3-story building relates in height to our neighbor. And then we've got 2 stories above that in metal with the 5th floor setback. The C Street facade and the First Street facade. I do want to mention that in the refinements that we made to the massing and the setbacks that we added to the west side of the building, that the shadows, I have a complete shadow study, but these are a couple samples from that study that show that the shadows cast from the proposed design as it stands today fall within the shadows that would have been cast by our 3-story 2014, our design that was approved in 2014. So this is April, August at 9 a.m. And you can see the shadow falling within the red dashed line, which represents the shadow cast by the design approved back in 2014. It's later in the day, middle of the summer. And we're not casting, in midday, we're not casting any shadows on the gardening plots in Mahoney Park next to us. If you'd like to see plans, I have them in an appendix. We really wanted to focus on the massing and the building envelope or the facades. I do have additional plans and renderings if you'd like to see those.
Ron, I might suggest focusing on the proposed open space.
Yes. We have open space in front of the building, what I'm calling the pocket park. And then, you know what, I do need to refer to another plan because I don't have one that shows the interior courtyard. Here it is. So behind 186 West 2nd Street, we have a courtyard, an internal courtyard with private decks, and it's elevated above street level. It's approximately 3 to 4 feet above street level, and we'll have common area space for any of the tenants to use, as well as some private decks shown here in this lavender color. That's our open space for the tenants only, and it's our intention to try to reserve this space out front, the pocket park, for tenant use as well. I mean, it's essentially their front yard. And we do have Mahoney Park right next door, which is a public amenity. And then, of course, there's landscape buffers all the way around the building. And on First Street, oh, I need to go to a different plan. Here it is. Where our retail spaces front on First Street, we've got outdoor seating, wider planting areas, and a nice wide sidewalk, bike share, street trees, and a dog relief area. Do you have any questions about the open space or anything else?
And I'm sorry, Ron, did you say that your landscape architect was with you this evening?
Yes, I'd like to introduce Anton from MDLA. He can get into more specifics about our pocket park and the landscape design.
So I might ask for you all to do that in the final minute and a half that you have.
Okay.
I would say in particular the streetscape as well as the pocket park.
Right, and
Okay.
if you could just go into a little more detail, it's hard for me to understand. If you could just kind of give us a little more information about materiality and programmatic
Sure.
intention, that'd be great.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, we're complete streets compliant. You know, we're using the 4x8 foot tree pits, 30 feet on center. And there's currently no existing trees on West First and C Street along our property. So we'll be adding green to those areas, which we're really excited about. And we're also adding a lot of guest parking spots, you know, everything that obviously Complete Streets calls upon. We're running that brick apron pattern along the concrete walkway to match what's going on in the neighborhood right now. Permeable pavers at all the entrances. We want to add a nice.
I'm sorry to interrupt
mhm.
you, Tom.
Yep.
Would you
No
mind
problem.
zooming in and pointing as you're talking? This is my first time seeing the project, so
No problem.
appreciate it.
Do you have it open, Anton?
I don't, but I could
Ron,
share.
why don't you just zoom in for him? Just tell him where you want him to zoom in.
Sure. I'll point, you narrate.
Sure. Well, we could start in the top left, toward the dog relief area, and then work our
Yes.
way around.
Okay,
Yeah. So if you could zoom in there,
Wanna zoom in, Ron?
yes.
thank you. Yeah. So we added the dog relief area. The goal is to hopefully reduce the amount of dogs using the Mahoney Park lawn. I know it's a big issue. We're hoping that most people are going to end up in this fenced-in area, and you know they can allow their dogs to run around and have fun there. So that's the thought process behind that. And then moving east, you can see we've incorporated a few benches, some seating out front, you know, for Uber pickup or just, you know, general seating in front. By 2, you can see there's a blue bike station. So we've incorporated, I believe there's 15 bikes in that location.
So are those 2 rectangular shapes benches then around?
Those
3 or
are
4?
planters.
So, oh, the white corners are the seating, is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And then we wanted to add a lot of shade tolerant planting in front because, you know, in front, the north side is not going to get that much sun. So we've done that there. And then moving east, we have some more permeable pavers and some patio seating. And there's a little bit of a slope, so we have a wall and fencing there. And then, you know, moving down C Street, we've incorporated taller shrubs where we can, and where there's building overhang, we have more of a low ground cover, while also adding a row of honey locusts along that street. And then that's a continuation of the honey locusts around that corner, more permeable pavers, and then more planting that obviously does better in the sun, as this will get more sun in this location. And then I could quickly review the amenity deck. We're showing a variation in the type of paving up there. We're using deck tiles and like porcelain pavers as well. So we wanted to break it up into a game space. We wanted to break it up into social areas for the tenants to enjoy, while also giving a little bit of privacy to the private decks that everyone has.
Anton,
Patios, I should say. Mm-hmm.
Can you describe, I understood it was 3 feet up higher than, you know,
Yes.
grade. So how does that intersect with the adjacent building?
The intersection, the middle building's first level in the rear is a parking garage. So we are probably 3 feet higher than their parking garage, comes up 8 feet. And then they have a little yard space behind their parking garage. They don't seem to be using the yard space very much, but that first level is a parking garage for them. Our parking garage, which comes up below these courtyard, the center courtyard, is about 3.6 above grade in this area. So their garage is about 8 feet above grade, and ours is about 3.6. Okay, now we're at grade on the sides coming down next to them. So you see these two staircases that come down. We come down to grade pretty quickly, and all that area is at grade around their property.
Okay, I don't know that I'm understanding. Is there
Yeah.
some retaining
neither.
wall that's
There's a
where's-
foundation wall that is right here. It's part of the foundation wall of the building. Because that's garage, and this is a foundation wall of the building too. That is units on one end, and then as you go over, you have the foundation wall like that. So that's all foundation wall.
Our concrete podium sticks out of the ground back there, but we're still well below their first floor.
Yeah, you're about
living
3
areas.
feet above grade. This is all built on top of the garage. This courtyard is built on top of the garage.
We have parking under here.
So that dashed black line
That's the
is
property line.
right, but that's at grade with the hatch area north
Yeah.
of it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then so the retaining wall is at what you're calling the foundation wall.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's the foundation wall. Yep.
We're set back 3.5 to 5 feet from the property line in all cases.
Is there any other questions?
Oh, could you just talk about the
The parking
semi-public park?
Yeah,
Sure.
Jason.
And specifically the relationship, like with a transition between that park and your park and the public park.
Yeah, is
Of
there a
course, of
fence
course.
between the two?
So currently there's a fence, and what we plan to do is remove 70 feet of it. And we plan to follow that grade. So if you're walking on West Second, the goal is you won't notice the difference between Mahoney Park and our pocket park. It'll all look cohesive. That's kind of the goal that we have here. And then also we want to block those transformers in Mahoney Park because they're a little bit large. So we've added some shrubs there and some river birches, which are doing really well in Mahoney Park right now. So we really want it to be an extension of Mahoney Park because we know it's, it really is an important part to the neighborhood, and we want to embrace that and then have that carry over to our site.
And just to provide the,
Go ahead.
sorry, McKen.
It's a visual extension. So the fence is removed, the grade along both sides of the property, all the way from Second Street to First Street. Both properties will be graded at the same grade. So the grade will follow the whole park from one street all the way through the whole block down to the other street.
And Peter, just to provide a little bit of additional context, we've been in conversations with Boston Parks Department to see if there was the opportunity to have a physical connection between these two spaces. I think at this time, Parks was not interested in creating a physical connection or expanding the actual footprint of the park. So the challenge has been, how do we create a publicly accessible, privately owned open space that's immediately adjacent to a public park that still provides public benefit and amenity and visual cohesiveness.
So what we've done there, Seth, is we've actually used the same plants and the same shapes that are in Mahoney Park. So the buffer between the two properties is really plantings on both sides, and they're going to be the same species of plantings. So you have a nice buffer, although it is two different properties, you'll never know where the property line is because the plants themselves will grow on both sides of the property line. We additionally took the shape of the pathways in Mahoney Park, and we used the same shapes in our park on our side. And that's how we've merged the parks. That's why we're recommending that there's a 6-foot fence currently between the properties. We're proposing that we take down the first 70 feet of the fence so that the plantings merge together. and there is no identifiable barrier between them. And then for the rest of the park, they have a 6-foot fence, which we're suggesting we reduce to 4 feet to make it a little more visually friendly as it continues down from approximately this point to First Street. And by grading them of the same grade, they have a current block system that grades higher than us, and we will just grade to their grade all the way down and use that as the grade coming down the property line for both properties.
I'm just going to acknowledge that we went from presentation to questions, and so we haven't really gotten to commissioner comments, I think. But we're a small group tonight, so
Yeah, I
I
wonder
don't
if
have
we
to
have to
call
raise
on.
our hands and
I don't
stuff
think
when
so.
talk.
We
Yeah,
can,
it'd be nice
just
to have
feel
a conversation.
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Is there any more commissioner questions?
I mean, I think we probably have a lot. We're just trying to digest. And so I'm going to let my fellow commissioners go first, and I'm happy to chime in if.
And can you clarify what's happening? So I understand that you are removing about 70 feet of the existing fence, but that you are keeping the existing fence where it runs alongside your building. And can you just help us understand what's happening? What's the material of the fence? How much space? Like, what's the relationship between the building and the fence? What's happening in that space?
Currently or in the future?
I guess both.
Currently, we have a grade change from them, so they put up a concrete block system to
Okay.
retain as a retaining wall between the park and our property.
Right.
And on top of that block system, they have installed a 6-foot chain link black fence. So that's what exists there today. What we're proposing is that once we complete our building is to use the grade that they've established. They step the grade down by 2-foot increments. They start at about 25 on the Second Street side. I think you see a little memo here of 23, and then it steps down to 21 in increments of 2 feet. So we would use the same grading system that they've established with their concrete blocks to grade to our building. And then at the very end, it drops off a little more than the 2 feet. I think it drops off 4 feet at the end of just before West First Street. The fence, because the fence is a 6-foot chain link fence, it's not the most visually pleasing fence in the world. So what we're proposing is that we remove it and put a 4-foot chain link fence, which would be much softer in appearance than the 6-foot fence, to put the divide between the two properties. It's their fence. I think we would need approval from the city to remove it and replace it. But that's what we're proposing. Again, the grading on both sides would be level, and now you wouldn't see the concrete blocks along the edge that you currently see, and you would just see graded land between the two properties.
And is there a building elevation? I'm looking at the draft presentation, and it looks like what you're presenting now has changed quite a bit. Is it possible for you to just quickly pull up a building elevation so we can see what it would look like?
So there it is right there. So the grade that you're seeing, the black line is their fence along the edge of the property line. So you can see here for the first part of the property where our pocket park is, there is no fence for a long distance.
Right.
And then you have a small fence area here because we have a set of stairs that we need as an egress. That will go on actually it'll go on the property line. And then this fence exists. It's not drawn in as a chain link, but this fence exists. And this is the grade line coming down currently. And then as you see it on First Street, you can see that the grade accelerates a little more at the last probably 15, 20 feet of it.
Is the space occupiable between the existing fence and your building? Like, are those terraces or?
Well, no. We have simply a graded area that's between 4.5 and 5 feet wide along the property line. There is no decks there or anything else. It's just graded area. We do have some balconies, as you can see on the top, on the 4th level, and then we have a couple set back on the very top. Both of those are set back. The 4th floor is set back 10 feet from the edge of the 3rd floor, again, trying to minimize the shadows on the park. And then the 5th floor is set back an additional 10 feet from the 4th floor, or 20 feet from the 3rd floor. Again, minimizing the shadows on the park.
And is level 1 the first level that has residential units on it?
Yes, yes.
But essentially, I'm just looking at a before and after from what the approved previous project was, is you're requesting to increase the height of this building by 2 stories. Is that right?
Yes, yes. We're
Even
increasing
though
the height.
I see that you're setting things back and stuff.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You
We've
are
changed the
looking,
shape, but we're increasing the height by 2 stories, exactly.
I mean, I think would be helpful because I know this area a little bit, but I'm not 100% familiar. Been walking around it, kind of walking around it and on the computer, and I'm just having trouble understanding the scale of your proposal to the neighborhood.
Okay. So
And I know that the neighborhood, some of it seems like it's, you know, underdeveloped. But I just would like to just have a better understanding of the relationship of this new height, because it seems like your original proposal was more in keeping with the scale of the neighborhood.
Ron, can you go to the slide that shows the elevations between the buildings next to us and us on C Street?
Yeah, I mean, you're showing the building to the right, which I
on-
know is a bigger building, but the buildings kind of across the street and to the left are
Well, we actually,
smaller, aren't they? Or am I
well, no,
missing-
directly across from us are 4-story buildings as well. So what we've done, do you have that slide, Ron, that you can pull up? It's an elevation slide that shows that West 2nd Street. Ron, are you there? Okay, this is, go back, no, go back 1 slide. You can, no, West 2nd Street. Okay. So I'm going to try to do it from this slide. There is another slide, but this is 186 West 2nd Street, and we kept our 3rd floor elevation in line with 186 West 2nd
Do
Street.
you have an elevation from First Street, though?
From I can show you the elevation from First Street, but the neighborhood really, the neighborhood exists on 2nd Street. There is no neighborhood other than the Signal Building, which I own on First Street and West Square. So the buildings on First Street are bigger than the buildings on 2nd Street. So that's the transition between the neighborhood. So let me first go over 2nd Street with you.
So
And
the
then
buildings across the street from you are 3 stories on 2nd Street, right? I'm just
No,
getting to know this
they're-
neighborhood a little bit.
the 2 on the corner are 4 stories, and the one across from us on 2nd Street is 4 stories. So we aligned our 4th story up with West Square, and we aligned our other 4th story up with the Signal Building, which is on the same side of the street as us. We've set back the 5th story so it's not visual from 2nd Street, and we've aligned our 3rd story building up, 3rd story of our building up with the 3-story building in the middle. The buildings across.
I'm sorry, it would be helpful if you had a drawing that was a little bit, like showed a little bit of context to the building. We're seeing everything kind of close to the building, and I just want to make sure that this is not an addition of this huge block in this neighborhood, and that it's having a conversation. Verbally, what you're saying is it is. Visually, I just don't, like when I walk through the neighborhood, I'm not quite understanding it. So
And let me see if I can
do you
pull
have
up.
like an axon view with like the buildings around it? Now, I'm gonna let my fellow commissioners take over, but I'm having a little trouble understanding the project and its scale in this neighborhood. And I think if you could come back and kind of give us more drawings, that showed not just the building itself, but its relationship to the context. That would be great.
I can actually give you an elevation if you'd like to see it.
Perfect. That'd be great.
All right, so let me show you. I'm going to share my screen, Ron.
I think Peter, the commissioner, is asking for a drawing that we haven't seen yet tonight, that shows this building in context with buildings surrounding it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll do that at another time then. But we do
I
have.
think that would be so helpful. It's not really saying that there's anything right or wrong about the project. I just don't, when I'm walking through this neighborhood, and I may be walking through the wrong part of it, there are some very charming, like Victorian style houses, and I'd just like to see, I'm not against bigger buildings, but I just want to see how things fit, and that you're not, there's something kind of charming about this neighborhood today. And there's a difference in how you're, so I'm going to go to landscape. There's a difference in how you're creating streetscape to your building and maybe your neighbors, which I think I understand, but I'm not sure. Whereas you're creating, I think you have a generous sidewalk, which I think is great. It's like 13 feet on average or something, but you're putting a very large planter, like foundation planting around the street, the sidewalk of the building. And I'm looking at your neighbors and they all have plantings on the curb side of the, and so I just want to see, like, how are you making these decisions? I think it could be quite lovely to have them, but you want to stitch this building into a larger neighborhood. So that would be my bigger comment to you. I think there's a lot of interesting moves you've made to try to kind of push the building back. And then I'll go to that public park.
Can we have a plan up?
Yeah, that'd be great. I just wonder if there's something, this neighborhood feels a little neighborhoody, right? Like maybe families live here. I see in the Google there are people pushing their strollers and all the folks who live here. Maybe there's something about programming of that public park that differentiates it from the public park next to it. So it'd be great if there was a connection, like a path between them, but if not, if that's not possible. But I think there's already lawn in Mahoney Park. And I just wonder if there could be some more like backyard programming, like vegetable gardening or things that kind of hearken to a neighborhood and make this feel more homey. So that would be my one piece of advice. It feels like it could use a little bit of programmatic character that's unique to the demographic who's living here. So those would be my only two comments.
Maybe I'll chime in because I have seen this project a couple of times, and I think, you know, where this project is happening is right where it's transitioning from the, you know, townhouses or row houses to much larger projects. Definitely along West First, definitely along Second, you'll start to see these bigger, you know, Texas wrapped style apartment buildings. I think what they're trying to do is balance, you know, the project viability and, you know, respond to some comments that we've suggested that they need to ensure that the quality of Mahoney Park is not being compromised. So I do think that that before and after of that massing change helps to, you know, contribute positively to the park. We were very worried the last time about that increased height. It was good to see that shadow study of where the park were not affecting more than what was previously approved, because I think that's one thing that I'm very mindful of. And I definitely think where you've added square footage seems to be reasonable. And certainly the height on First Street is going to be in line with other projects that we've approved along First Street. So I think the massing has improved. You know, I do have some issues with the architecture, but I think, you know, that's at least my thoughts as seeing this before. They have come a little, they have come, you know,
guess,
a long way in that regard.
I can understand that process. My initial reaction, and I don't want to like say it unequivocally, but is that it still feels pretty big. So I know there's been an evolution towards this, which I really appreciate, but just wonder if there's some way in which maybe Mimi, you could talk about the facades because that they could
Yeah.
somehow respond, because it feels almost like a wraparound, but the first and second street are very different, and so.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. Maybe we could get a site plan too. I think
Yeah.
what is a little bit also unsatisfying to hear is that the park wasn't interested in connecting. Can we go to a site plan?
Yep, we'll go to the Ron, you want to go to the plan?
That wasn't interested in making those connections because I feel like you have a pathway that's similar in scale to the existing pathways at Mahoney Park, but you're actually not going anywhere. You're going to like a stair or an
Right.
egress stair. And so that feels like it could be confusing. You might get, people walking their dog going up to a place you don't want them to go. So
Yeah.
I do think if there's not that interest in connecting the park, maybe those visual cues have to redirect to another way or something. But I like the intention that you want to connect to this park, but I actually don't think, it's actually working in your benefit to have that big path to that egress stair. But I do think that making it seem like a bigger park at the front end and getting rid of that fence is a positive for sure.
Yeah, like maybe use different terminology, and instead of calling this a park, it's more of like a yard or something more residential where people, I just feel like maybe they barbecue out here, maybe they plant vegetable gardens, they do things that people do in a more domestic setting that they wouldn't do at Mahoney Park. And maybe we accept that they're two separate, and this is dedicated to this development. Because I agree, I think having that really wide path there's something a little commercial about the way this, as you're trying to mimic the public park, and maybe it just gets scaled down a little bit.
Yeah, and commissioners, we will certainly reach out to Parks again to discuss this further to see if that opportunity exists past the first conversation we had with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mick Young, I believe that there are community gardens in the upper part of the
think
park.
so.
You can
Yeah.
kind of see them. I think
Top,
those
top
are,
left.
Yeah.
yeah.
I am interested in how successful they are, because a lot of community gardens are so successful. I mean, there's like months and months of wait list, and I just walked by it in Google Earth, and it looks very charming, like little scruffy. There's like a wood shed, and I kind of love that. Like I kind of like that it feels less, I don't know, corporate or complete and finished by the residents, So I think the more it can be inspired by Mahoney, whether it's vegetable gardens or flower gardens or whatever they are.
So commissioners, I was hearing some very, good commentary and specific asks for additional material, particularly to put the building in context and better describe the scale and the relationship of this building to other buildings, not just the 186 West 2nd Street, but sort of up and down 2nd Street as well as 1st Street.
But Mimi, do you have comments about the facade architecture that you want to relay to this opponent?
Yeah,
Yes.
and I'd like to invite additional comments, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe if we go to, in particular, the West first, I think you have simplified the massing, have simplified the moves, which I think the simpler the better, is always good. I still, think that there's architectural language around these corner posts and balconies that feel really uncomfortable to me. I don't know what the right solution is, but I do think that this corner open, balcony moment and the two-story height entrance the language doesn't feel very cohesive yet. And I think the other architectural comment that I have is when you have those bays that overhang, I know you have plantings underneath, but they just feel like shadow areas that you might want to think a little bit more about that language. Like, I don't know, does it taper or something? It feels, I don't know that putting a window into the garage is the right architectural solution there. As the grade changes, those elements come really close to sidewalk height. I don't know, any commissioners have any comments? I know, David, you joined in midway through the presentation, but
yeah, my apologies for being so late. Just two comments. I agree with what you just said, Mimi, and I wonder if there's kind of a disengagement of the corners from the body, and a sort of uncomfortable change in scale. In the masonry part of the building, windows they're small, but I'm not criticizing that. But then I get to the corners, and the corners read, of course, like a 6-story element, or at least a 5-story element. And then I get back to the punch, and then the bays read like, again, a bigger element. And I'm wondering if there's a way to be more consistent about the scale. If we want the scale to feel residential, have streetscape and then be residential above, find the middle ground in the scaling elements, and not, I feel big to small, and that's making I don't know, making it feel sort of discontinuous and disconnected. And then my only other comment is, I think the drawing, that the easiest way to communicate what McYoung is looking for is, you had that aerial axonometric, but you only had the block. And if you had the surrounding blocks in that drawing, I think that would help us enormously to understand how it connects on all 4 sides. That was a very interesting drawing, and to Mimi's point, I think you have made some nice massing moves. I think pulling the building back, adding the massing where you added it was not detrimental. Where you pulled it back was helpful to the existing building. It's a hard thing you're trying to do, not overwhelm the existing building. And I think it feels better than the first time we saw it. But I think if you could add, even in a massing kind of way, all 4 sides are on the opposite side of the street, it would help us understand a lot better.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, commissioners, do you have any more comments, or should we look towards public testimony?
I'm ready to go to public testimony, everyone. Good? Okay. We can always follow up with more comments.
Okay, so at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and I will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep comments to 2 minutes. And we have one hand raised. Valerie, if you can unmute yourself. And I suspect Valerie may also be able to speak to the gardening plots as well.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm Valerie Burns, and I'm a community gardener at Mahoney Park. And I was on the list for 3 years, and I got a plot last year. So I'm very excited about my second year in the park. And just a word about Mahoney Park is a new park. It's a success of the neighborhood. It's something that the neighborhood is very proud of. It's only about 6 years old. It was created. There's no parks in this neighborhood. There's lots and lots of people coming. We have lots of larger buildings like this one that you're looking at in the neighborhood. So there's lots of people, and there's no parks. And there are balconies and there are little bits of private spaces, but there are no parks. So this park was a Public Works, City of Boston Public Works yard, and there was some developer community benefit funds and city funds, and the community worked really hard to create this park. And one of the things the neighborhood wanted was a community garden, because even if you're in the older housing, you have the traditional housing, you don't have any yard space. So there are 22 plots in the park. And we really need sunlight. We're very concerned about what's happening in the building next to us. This park is new. It wasn't there in 2014 when this building was first permitted. And we appreciate the trimming that's been done, but we are very concerned about the amount of shadow that remains primarily on the parks. I have a comment about the pocket park, but I see my stop, so I guess I'll stop.
Thank you, Valerie. Any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll return it to the commissioners and ask for the proponent to share their screen again and maybe put up a site plan.
Ron, you want to put up? Would you like a site plan, Seth? Is that what you requested? Yep. Okay.
Sure, we can start here to see if the commissioners have any other additional thoughts or questions.
There was one other comment that I did want to just offer. The sidewalk that's along C Street at 5 feet 4 inches wide seems fairly narrow.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's really following any complete streets guidance in terms of widths.
Yeah, I mean,
And so
it's actually 9 feet.
Yeah, it's 5 feet clear and then 4 feet for the tree pit. And then we have, I think, 4 feet 3 inches after that.
So that's the question is, do you actually need that foundation planting of 4 feet, I think? I don't know.
There's no foundation planting. The retaining walls are now gone. And that's
What is that green next to the building then?
This
4
is
feet
on
3
grade.
inches.
This is planting that's on grade. This is your net side. Your sidewalk is 5 feet, and then you have a 4 foot.
Right, so if you reduced the width of that green, you'd have a wider sidewalk, if I'm understanding this correctly.
These are the guidelines. So the guidelines in the area have a wider sidewalk on First Street and Second Street. So these are the PIC guidelines.
This feels very narrow to me, but.
Okay, oh, that's the guideline for the area is exactly that, 5 and 4. And then the sidewalk on First Street.
I would recommend just taking a look at it. Maybe you could draw a section just to show us, like if you have 2 people crossing each other, one person's a baby carriage, and you have those street pits, street trees. What are you getting there?
We will certainly look at this
appreciate
cross section to confirm that this is the recommended complete streets sidewalk and cross section, which I think it is here, but we will double check to confirm, Mika. And that's not to say that even within of course, within the available space between the curb and the building, as Mick Young is suggesting, there could be other ways to take a look at the distribution of the space here, Peter.
Yes, yep.
So I think commissioners, we have a big decision to make. Have we given enough guidance that the proponent can work with the planning staff on these revisions and come back to full commission, or do we need to see them again as they work through the revisions we talked about?
It does feel to me like there's more work to be done, but I'm not a good judge of when that should happen and with whom. So I'm going to leave this to you guys. And this is my first time seeing it, so I don't feel it's fair that I make that judgment.
Anne Marie, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah.
What are you?
I guess because I had asked questions about the landscape. So I think the proponent, you've done a good job of addressing the specific scale issue of, stepping down to meet the park. When I think about our responsibility as BCDC, a key aspect of it is understanding the building within its context. And I understand, and I was present for the previous presentation and understand that you are negotiating the change in scale between the neighborhood and an area that had a whole different scale of building. So the one thing that I think is missing in this presentation, in addition to the issues that were discussed in this forum, the absence of an understanding of how this fits within the surrounding context is a little troubling. And I guess just to confirm, Mimi, so the idea is that is determining whether or not we vote that this comes back to us, or whether we vote to say we put it in the hands of the planning staff, correct?
Correct.
Well, it would need to come back regardless for full commission.
Okay,
right.
Yes.
It's whether it comes back to subcommittee.
Okay.
And, certainly I think from my point of view, the direction we've heard loud and clear. I think we have a lot of work to do with the proponent on both the content to help, justify the decisions and the larger massing and the moves here, as well as continued refinement to the streetscape, to the landscape, to the architecture itself. So it's certainly something that we are committed to working with the proponent on, and working on until we feel that it's ready to go. It's not something that we would bring back next week, month for a vote, because I do think there are some things here that need addressing.
So there's a question from
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
about the community. I assume that there is a community process. Can you give us a little bit more insight about what's happening, Seth, with that?
Yes. So as this is Article 80B, large project review, there is a series of public meetings, as well as, I believe, an IAG meeting that has taken place. I believe Valerie has, among others, have been a part of the public meeting process. I do not know if they have another public meeting scheduled or not. So that I would have to get back to you about.
So
All right.
I guess I would say, not speaking specifically about the landscape architecture, but the architecture that I could frankly go either way. I think, when this comes back to full commission, there needs to be a lot of, there needs to be additional material to help us understand the conditions that we discussed this evening, at this meeting, both in terms of understanding how this development fits within the context of the surrounding community, to better understand the landscape and the streetscape, between the building and the street, and then to address the recommendations or the suggestions that were made in respect to the relationship or the design of the pocket park that's within the development site and the adjoining public park.
Can you give me a little refresher? I'm sure you said this at the beginning. So this went through one full, the first of the month presentation.
Yes, there was an introduction, and this is the
And then
first.
walk me through the next. Is this the first subcommittee meeting?
This is the first subcommittee meeting.
Okay, I'm gonna make a vote. It might be a little unpopular with the proponent team, but it's a big project. There are questions about the facade design, the size, the context, landscape. I think this deserves a second viewing in subcommittee, and then that could happen at any time, Seth. It could happen after, maybe that's a recommendation I would make. It happens after, Seth, you work with the proponent group, and I know you guys do a great job. Then it comes back to us, subcommittee, and I'm sure, but just to see a project of this scale and magnitude just have one subcommittee meeting feels a little light to me, but I don't know how my fellow commissioners feel.
I support what Mick Young just said for the reasons she just said it. And I would just add this, that we've talked a lot about seeing better, understanding better the context. But I would urge the proponent not to just come back, and I know that Seth and urban design won't let this happen, but I'm going to say it anyway. Don't just come back and show us context. Show us real refinement and development, so that you make it easy to say, let's go to full commission. And I think that's some of the site issues that you've heard about, and also the architecture kind of all around the building, on especially the public faces of the building.
And I would add, to have even a better shot of getting to full commission the next time, come with options. Like if there are architectural solutions that you feel, you want input on, or pocket park, ideas that you want input on. I do think that often we see proponents come with options instead of just one final design. So I think that could be something to think about.
I don't mind if you guys come with options and say, this is what we prefer. In fact, I prefer that. But to show that there was a process of looking at the streetscape, looking at the facades as they are on First and Second Street, and seeing if that impacts the work at all. I think that would help a great deal.
Yeah. And Seth, if I could just ask, just one conversation with the parks would be helpful to really understand, do they really need to pivot and just, do something adjacent but separate, or is it something that we could really tie in? I think that's a really important piece to figure out.
Okay, all of that heard, documented, and of course this is also being recorded, so we'll go back to the recording to make sure that we get everything as well. And there's no vote occurring, so no formal provisos, but a lot of great feedback from the commissioners on how to improve both the argument for what this building is, as well as improving the building itself and the landscape and its relationship
I want
to the
to
landscape.
commend the proponent for bringing housing into this neighborhood, really rejuvenating this neighborhood. I think it's very exciting. And so just work with us here a little bit and bring it to the next level. I think it'd be very exciting for this neighborhood.
Okay, and I know the planning department feels the same.
Oh, great. It's always good when we're on the same page.
And so, commissioners, it's my understanding that the proposed project is recommended for additional review at Design Review Subcommittee. Thank you to the proponent and proponent team. Commissioners, as always, thank you for your time and look forward to seeing you. A reminder that we have another subcommittee next week. So hope to see you then.
Thank you, everybody.
Right.
You guys have a
Yes.
great evening.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.